I am coming live to you tonight with a very special author guest who's joining us all the way from Australia, and we're so excited to have Sulari with us tonight. We'll give everybody a few seconds to kind of get situated and get in here, and we'll start with we'll do a quick introduction. We'll have some Q&A, and if you have any questions, you can pop them in the chat or just say, I have a question, and I'll bring you on stage, and you can actually ask live. It's a new feature we learned how to do, so everybody can come in and sort of talk one-on-one, get that in-person experience virtually. And we are so excited tonight to be hosting this event. So for those of you who don't know, I work and own Swamp Fox Bookstore with two of my very good friends, Amanda Zorney and Ursula Lanfear. We opened the bookstore in the uptown area of Marion, Iowa in July of 2020. We grew slowly and are now currently in a joint building that has both our children's and adult books together. And we love matching books with readers. And Sulari's book is just right up our alley because it's a book about books, it's a book about authors, and it's a murder mystery. So it kind of hits all our sweet spots on everything we like. And it's a wonderful book. I posted about it the other day because it was raining here, and I read it on a weekend, and I thought a couple months ago, and I thought it was the perfect book for a rainy day, or if it's like it was yesterday here, over 100 degrees with the heated index, I just don't want to go outside. So awesome. Well, thank you for joining us tonight, Sulari.
Oh, absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be in Iowa.
Yes.
Is that where I am?
Yes.
All these places I'm beaming into.
And just a little bit about you. So after setting out to study astrophysics, graduating in law, and then abandoning her legal career to write books, Sulari Gentill now grows French black truffles on her farm in the foothills of the Snowy Mountains of Australia. Her Rowland Sinclair mysteries have received awards and high praise, and her standalone metafiction thriller After She Wrote Him won the Ned Kelly Award for Best Fiction in 2018. And her 10th Sinclair novel, Where There's a Will, was shortlisted for the Ned Kelly 2021 Best Fiction Award. Her latest novel, A Woman in the Library, came out last week and has been getting a lot of thumbs up. We've had quite a few customers pick it up, and I actually had a friend that picked it up, and she's passing along and gave it rave reviews. So excited to share this book with our readers tonight. So we'll just jump into questions, and if people have questions, like just drop them in the chat or just type in there really quick, and we will break in. And we do have a group joining us in a live watch party, so we'll have them come in and see if they want to ask any questions in person or any comments as well. So look forward to this. So tell us, Sulari, what is the day in the life of an author look like for you? Before we jumped on, we talked about your new puppy, so I'm assuming some of that involves working with the new puppy.
Indeed. So my new puppy, whose name is Pig, is a truffle dog, or is going to be trained as a truffle dog. So what I'm doing at the moment is trying to scent train her so that she, hunts for truffles, because they grow under the ground and we can never find them without the dog. But but otherwise, what I do is I get up and I write. And even in between the dogs and in between everything else and whatever else I can push aside, I just open my laptop. I write in my pajamas. There's nothing particularly professional about the way I do it. I sit in bed most of the time with the television on, and I write stories. And when I have 4 dogs. The other 3 are now old enough that they'll just sleep at my feet. And when the puppy's asleep, that's fine. Sometimes she likes to stick her head onto the keyboard and type a chapter herself. But I'm hoping she'll grow out of that. But yeah, so basically it's just a really casual arrangement in terms of writing. I mean, if you're going to be a writer, you don't want to put on a corporate suit and go to work. And for me, it's always been trying to make space in my real life to do as much writing as possible. The writing's never been the hard part. It's shoving everything else aside.
Yes. Yes, that guilt you feel a little bit for doing that.
Yeah.
Pursuing a creative endeavor. There's something there, but we appreciate you taking working on the books and getting them out to us. We love them. So I just have to say, last year I read Truffle Hound by Rowan Jacobson, which talked about how they train. Like, it's about the history of truffles, and he had an entire chapter about training dogs to hunt truffles and why they moved away from pigs to dogs. It was a
Yeah.
fascinating book.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, that's why Pig is named Pig, because originally the truffle hunters were pig, and they are. I have had truffle dogs before. The reason I've got Pig is my old truffle dog, who was wonderful. His name was Badger. Passed away. He was 14 years old. Passed away last spring, and it took us a few months to get a new dog because we were still so heartbroken.
Mhm.
But there's something very special about working with an animal. You develop this very special bond and a language where I could swear Badger understood every word I said. I could have read him one of my books, and I think he would have been fine. But,
I've heard that reading aloud your rough drafts is a great way to find where things need to be shored up and revised and moved around. I've heard a lot of authors do that. Do you do that at all?
I used to do it, but now. So The Woman in the Library is my 15th book,
Mhm.
or 15th published book. So I think I find now that my inner voice is so loud,
Oh
I
yeah.
don't actually need to read it out loud. I can hear it. But that's come after several books. In the beginning, I used to read everything aloud, but it's actually exhausting to read an entire novel aloud. So
Sure it
if
is.
if there's a chapter that I'm not sure whether it's worked, I'll read it aloud. And quite often I'll read it aloud to my husband or to someone else
Mhm.
so that they can catch it, or have them read it aloud to me. So it is a really good way of putting the book in through another channel,
Mhm.
um, so that you can test it. But nowadays, I think yeah, my internal voice has got so loud, it's not necessary.
Wonderful. So, what inspires you the most? When did you know you wanted to be a writer? You said you write with the TV on. Are there things on TV that trigger you to come up with a new story? Are there other things that inspire you?
Oh, oh, no, no, no. The TV's not about inspiration. It's 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 a very I've always done that. I've always written best in the middle of mayhem. So I started writing when my boys were really little. And so I had these two small boys running around the house, and so I had to learn to actually shut out the world and go into the book. And then I found that that was the way I wrote best. But the writing in front of the television then sort of happened to develop. And I used to be really, really ashamed of that. And I'd never tell anyone because it sounds like you don't care. That, oh, I'll just knock off a novel while I'm watching television, and that you're not putting 100% effort into it. And so I was always very, very ashamed to admit it. But then one day I was talking about it, and I was talking to a friend of mine who happens to not only be a writer, but she's a cognitive psychologist. And she said to me, "Oh no, Solari, that makes perfect sense." So this is the cognitive psychology explanation of what I'm doing. What Kylie said to me is that the creative center of your brain is in your prefrontal cortex. Now, your prefrontal cortex is an area of your brain which is very difficult to access directly. That's why when you forget a word and you're trying to find it, you can't find it, but you go away and you do something else, and all of a sudden the word pops into your head. So I'm basically using an extension of that phenomenon to write a book. I'm distracting my brain doing something else and letting the prefrontal cortex take over and write a novel. So
That's
not just
amazing.
finding
I
one
had
word.
no idea. I read and listen to music or listen to the TV when I read a physical book. I've
Yeah.
always done it since I was a kid.
Yeah, and it just allows you to immerse, and let the creative center of your brain just take over and go. That I mean, that's what works for me anyway. It's different for everybody. So I've always written with the television on, so it's always got to be something that's not really engaging,
Mhm.
or that you can watch without 100% attention. So that's something that's really familiar. So I tend to watch old BBC crime dramas like Midsummer Murders,
Oh, yes.
because because they're lovely, but they've got a sort of a gentle rhythm, so you can sort of keep track whilst doing something else.
Yes, yes.
And so all my novels have been written to a background of Morse and Midsummer Murders and Lewis and all the old BBC crime dramas.
So instead of a playlist, you'd have sort of an episode list at the end of your book if you were putting something together.
Look, it's funny. For some reason, music, I can't do it. Whatever
Mhm.
the channel is with music, if I have
Yeah.
music on, I find myself being distracted by the music. So I don't know what it is. I'm not particularly musical,
Mhm.
so maybe that's it. Maybe it takes more of my brain than necessary to follow a tune,
Yeah.
and words are fine.
That's cool though. I've not I hear of writers writing to music all the time or complete silence or going to some place like a coffee shop so they have that white noise.
Yeah.
The TV is new. I love it though. It's great. So where do you get the inspiration from? Where did the inspiration for the woman in the library come from?
Oh, that was a really particular one. I mean, inspiration's one of those things. There's no one place, and different books come from different sources. And the wonderful thing about being a writer is that everything you ever did, or felt, or smelled, or thought before is all material. So it's not like it begins, and within this frame of time you get inspiration. You draw on everything you've ever known. But for this particular book was unusual in that it had a very particular moment of inspiration. And it came from, I was writing another book. I was writing the 10th Rowland Sinclair novel, which is also set in Boston. And because I've never been to Boston, I couldn't get there because COVID. I was corresponding with a friend of mine who happens to be an American writer, and he happened to be in Boston at the time researching his book, which is a non-fiction book called The Theft of Privilege. And Larry's a great friend of mine, but he's also a much, much better researcher than I am. So, whereas he wouldn't just answer my questions, he'd send me maps and menus and, suggestions of places to go and little bits and pieces from around the place. And then he started sending me footage of sidewalks so I could see what the snow looked like on the sidewalk and how the cobbles in Boston. And then one day there was a murder a couple of blocks from where he was staying. And he thought, oh, it might be useful for Sulari to know what crime scene tape and coroner's vans in America look like. So he went down there and he took footage of the crime scene after the body had been removed, but he took footage of the crime scene. And he sent it to me. And I'm sitting in Australia and I open this email from Larry, and this footage comes up of a crime scene. And my husband happened to be standing behind me. And he said, gee, I hope Larry's not killing people so he can send you research. As I say, I'm 99% sure that he wasn't, but it was a great idea for a novel. And
It
that's
is.
where The Woman in the Library sort of
And that
began.
was a question I had for you is like, did you have a chance to travel to Boston or did you rely on a researcher? And you relied on a researcher. That is amazing. So
Absolutely,
if
absolutely,
are,
100%. And Larry was not just there's a difference. Even going to a place is not as good as having someone who grew up in that place.
yeah.
So there's, even if I was to come to Iowa, you were to come here to Australia and spend 6 weeks here. In 6 weeks, you could not gather the sense of the place that someone who has, lived here all their lives knows. So in some ways, whilst being able to visit is wonderful, having a connection with someone who is a long-term resident and has roots and connections in the town, is so much more valuable, because Larry could not only, show me places, but he could tell me history and tell
Mhm.
me what was interesting, and things that locals did and locals said. So that worked out quite well. But I am looking very forward to visiting Boston in October to see
That's
whether see, I have this Boston in my head, and I feel like I've walked the streets of Boston in my head. I want to see if actually walking the streets of Boston will be the same thing.
how it works out. You'll have to
Yeah.
do like take pictures of this was in my book and that was in my book, has been in my
Yeah,
books and that type of thing.
exactly. I'm going to have to retrace the steps.
Definitely. And I know some authors have done that. They will share pictures of one of my friends just wrote a mystery novel that was inspired by uh, a wildlife refuge near her that they rescue turtles. And so she shared a lot of pictures of the wildlife area and the different things that inspired her children's mystery novel. So
Oh, lovely. Yeah, exactly. So she hadn't been there before, or she had
she had
actually.
her and her son are quite involved in that wildlife refuge, and in rescuing the turtle rescue process. So
Oh, lovely.
it's right down the road from her, but she wanted the readers and her fans to know what the real life locations that inspired her story.
Oh, we have, over here. I live in the mountains in New South Wales. At a certain time of year, we have what looks like a massive turtle migration, and you'll stop on the road because there's a turtle trying to walk across.
Oh
And
my.
of course, you can't wait for the turtle to get across, so you get out of your car and you pick the turtle up. And so locals spend a lot of time moving turtles off the road here as they amble across. And quite often I put them in the back and bring them to the farm and put them near the dam, where they can set their home. But for some reason, at a particular time of year, they
Mhm.
migrate or they move
Yeah,
en masse.
that is cool.
Yeah,
So
it is very cool.
so for those people that haven't read the Woman in the Library yet, it has a unique dual storyline. How did you keep those two storylines straight? Because they do start to overlap as you get farther and farther into the novel. And I know Ursula. I mean, you and I talked about this the other day when we did a little tech run through, and so Ursula will be interested to hear this. As she's listening to the book, and she said it was kind of confusing, so she had to pick up the physical book and take a look at it so she could keep the two storylines straight.
Yeah, so and as I was saying to you, interestingly, the in Australia, the audiobook is they hired two different actors, so that it would be easier for people to keep it straight. Because, of course, there's two storylines. There's the storyline between Hannah and Leo. Leo is writing to Hannah, and so you see his letters as he comments on her story and each chapter as she sends it to him. You don't actually see Hannah, but you see the story that she writes in response to the research and the information and the advice that Leo gives her. And then you also are reading Hannah's story, which is the story of Freddie, who is in the Boston Public Library, or Winifred, who is in the Boston Public Library when a scream rings out. And everybody stops, knowing that something terrible has happened, but there is no body. When a search is conducted, there's no body, there's no reason for the scream, and it's like, the scream came from nowhere and disappeared into nowhere. But that moment of uncertainty and that moment of anxiety allows the four people who are sitting at her table, herself and three others, to actually kind of bond and make friends and start a friendship. But of course, their friendship is founded on a scream, on an act of terror. And of course, they get deeper and deeper into what turns out to be the murder of a young woman. Um, so there's so there's both of those going on at the time, but I'm really very interested in metafiction and writing about writing, because I've been a mystery writer for a long time, but for me, one of the biggest mysteries in life is where these stories come from. You and I can talk about process, and I can talk about writing in my pajamas and writing in front of the television and what my inspiration is, but there's still a part of me that doesn't know what happens. that has no idea where these stories come from and why, certain influences would suddenly produce an entirely new set of facts. And part of me doesn't want to look too carefully at that, because it's a little bit like magic, and you're afraid that you'll wreck the magic.
Yeah.
Um, but the other part of me is actually fascinated. The scientist in me is fascinated of what's going on here. So in a way, I quite like writing stories where the workings are exposed.
Hmm.
So it's a little bit like one of those watches that show all the gears,
Hmm.
but they still work. They still tell you the time.
Yeah.
So what you've got is the time being told and the gears at the same time. And at some point, they start to intersect and overlap, and you wonder which one is the gears and which one is the time being told. Is that a really labored metaphor? It
No,
probably
I
is.
get it. I understand it. So, did you struggle to kind of bring it all together? I know the twist or the big reveal and the mystery is tough. Did you know as soon as you got them, were inspired by what Larry was sending you? Did you know how you were going to bring it all together, or was it like you had to? It was a
No,
struggle to get
I,
it there.
I'm a complete pantser. So, did you use that term in America? You do,
Yes,
don't
we
you?
do.
Yeah.
But I
All
will.
right.
We can explain to the people that are in the audience and might not get it. So you're basically writing by the seat of your pants rather than writing out an outline or plotting things out.
Yeah. So I'm on the extreme end of the pantsing plotting spectrum. I don't plot at all. I have no idea what's going on the next page, let alone in the next chapter or at the end of the book. So I started this book, and all I knew was it would start Dear Hannah, and it would open with a letter. That's all I knew. And I just let everything unfold. And I'm honestly, I can I mean that there's nothing. My mind is a blank when I started. It sounds absurd that I sit down, and all I knew was I had this notion of Larry writing to me and sending me these murder scenes, and thought, right, I'm going to sit down. Opens with Dear Hannah, and then I let it unfold. I write forward chronologically, so I start with the first word of the book and go till the end of the book. I don't go backwards, and I tend to be a one draft writer.
Wow.
So it just seems to fall onto the page, and this is what I was saying about my prefrontal cortex doing the work.
Yeah.
It's obviously working things out. It just isn't telling the conscious part of my brain,
Yeah.
because it probably thinks it'll scare me. So it,
Or it doesn't want to
it
reveal the magic
yeah,
of how
it
it all.
does. Yeah, it must be something like that, because it feels to me like I sit down, I've got the television on, and the story just falls onto the page. It unfolds, and one thing leads to another, and there's no. And in the beginning of the book, um, Freddie in chapter one was discussing how she writes, and she's talking about the beauty of grand arcs and structure. And I feel that way too. Sometimes I look wistfully at my friends who are plotters, because they have notebooks and they have beautiful plots, and they look like writers. I just sit down and write. I haven't got any of I haven't got any of the stuff that goes with it. I love notebooks. I obsessively buy beautiful notebooks, but they're all blank because I don't plot. and, when I die, there will be this collection of blank
Like
notebooks, which will be better
notebooks.
for my life. Yeah, that's it.
Well, you won't have to worry about anybody then publishing a book that you don't want published.
There'll be nothing there. It's all in here. So I mean, that's just how it's always been for me. That's not to say it'll always be that way, but it has been for 15 books. Um, and I keep going. There's always a point about three-quarters of the way through the book where I have a panic attack, because I think, oh no, I have no idea how to finish this. And I've written myself into a corner, and this was a really bad idea. Why didn't I write a plot? But at that point, with every single book, you just take a deep breath and you keep writing, and it somehow resolves itself, and and works out.
So we kind of talked that there's a little bit of a twist in this novel. So I wanted to ask you, what is your favorite novel, story, movie, television show that you feel got the twist just right for me, I love watching the movie Fallen, which is an older movie with Denzel Washington and John Goodman, with someone who has never seen it before, because the twist in that, it's I had this, my husband showed it to me years ago when we were dating, and I've shown it to people since then, and the look on their face when they figure out exactly what has been happening the entire movie is priceless, and just an amazing thing to watch happen.
I think I have watched that, and I think, if I'm remembering correctly, but I will go check it after this session. I'll go and check out Fallen just to make sure that it's the right one, because I'm terrible with titles. But I'm pretty sure that I agree with you. Shutter Island did that for me.
Mm.
It's still one of my all-time favorite movies, because I just gasped at the end. It caught me completely, and it's a metafiction as well, so I suppose it fits
Yes.
with that. There's a lot of movies I could talk about, but I never remember names of anything.
But Shutter Island is a good one.
Yeah. And then, going back to the old classics, Agatha Christie's, I think it was Lord Edgware Dies. Now, can I do a spoiler on that one? I'll do a spoiler on that one.
Probably, I would say Agatha Christie, yeah.
Yeah. So that's the book in which you realize at the very end that the narrator is the murderer. And, people have done that since then, but she was the first. And
Yeah.
she was certainly the first I read. And I just remember gasping. And it was just perfect, because I realized, like, a paragraph before it was revealed. And that's what you want as a mystery
That's exactly
reader.
what I want as a reader too, to just figure it
Yeah.
out just slightly before the
Yeah.
character
And then
figures
the
it out.
realization is complete. It's just amazing. You've still got all the joy of not knowing for a long time. You've got the realization that the writer played fair with you, and that you had all the information to come to the realization, and somehow coming to it yourself slightly before the the protagonist announces it is this feeling of triumph and realization, and it's just what you want. And as a writer, that's what you're trying to set up with a book.
Yep.
You're hoping that the readers will come with you, so that the twist is a surprise and is wonderful, but is not so surprising, or doesn't take them so out of it that they think, oh, this isn't fair, this is out of left field, this doesn't work. You want to leave them with this feeling of, yes, of course, that's how it happened. Why didn't I see it before?
Yeah. Awesome. Well, I'm going to check here quick to see if the group at Grand Living has any questions. So I'm going to see if I can bring them on stage here, and hopefully this works. And if anybody else in the audience has a question, like I said, you can drop it in the chat, and I can bring you on stage too to ask the question, or you can just type, if you're shy, you can just type the question straight into the chat, and we can grab it that way too. Just a little bit of delay here. Okay, we'll see if this works.
Fingers crossed.
Oh, there they are.
Oh, I can't.
Oh,
I can see a big GL. So.
Yep, we'll see if they can get their video on.
okay, Mr. Bill. Oh, there we go.
Hi, Ursula.
Hello.
There's a Grand Living. Hi.
Everybody wave. It's kind of hard to. They're all around. Nobody would sit up front, so
Oh.
they're all around in the back there. So, well, we are all listening to you. Does anybody have any questions for Sulari? Actually, have a microphone, or I can just ask for you if you'd rather. If you have anything you want to know. You want me to bring the mic to you? Hang on. You want to ask her? Oh, come on. This is the first time we've been able to do this. So it's kind of cool. Can you hear me, Terry?
Yes, I can.
Anybody?
How's the weather?
How's the weather?
Oh,
I just want to know how the weather is.
It's cold. We're in the middle of winter, so it's been snowing this week, and I'm in the mountains. And today, if I look out the window, it's completely foggy. You can't see more than a couple of feet. So it's like I'm living in the middle of a cloud at the moment, and it's freezing. It's really cold. It probably. I can't do the translation to Fahrenheit, but bearing in
I'll
mind that
Google.
yeah.
I'll
So
Google it quick. So what is it in Celsius?
It was
about 5 degrees, about 5 degrees Celsius. We're getting as a maximum for the day, and it probably drops down to about -1. So between -1 and 5.
so what are we Celsius, Terry? Because it was hot as heck today.
It wasn't.
Hot and humid.
It wasn't as hot as it was yesterday. We're about 32 degrees Celsius today.
32 degrees Celsius. Well, that's warm. I mean, it's for Australia. We don't consider it a hot day until we're hitting about 40 degrees Celsius. But we also get the cold winters out here in the mountains. So it's wet. It's wet and cold, and just the perfect weather for reading or writing, because going outside is miserable.
It's humid enough here that you don't want to go outside. I think the temperature was like 100, felt like 106 or 110 today.
Yes.
So Fahrenheit. So it's the humidity that gets us.
Yeah. No, I grew up in Brisbane, which is up in the north, and that's very humid as well in Queensland. And I remember the difference. A 30-degree day in Brisbane is very, very hot just because of the humidity.
Yep, that's how it is here. Look, you're on screen. So nobody has any questions? Okay, I finally have one.
The weather question was great because it's opposite of what we are experiencing here.
Yeah.
How long does it normally take you to write a book?
Once it starts and it starts going, I always find the first 10,000 words takes a little bit longer, because it's the setup. You're waiting for the characters to start talking to you properly, and you're waiting for everything to move. And after that, it just seems to write itself. So I usually give myself about 12 to 16 weeks to write a novel, so 3 or 4 months of hard writing. But of course, that's just the first part of it. Then when the manuscript is finished, then it goes to editors and publishers, and there's marketing and all sorts of things that come into the life of a book. But the actual manuscript, about 3 to 4 months.
About the length of a season of Midsummer Night's Murder or something?
Okay. Well, nowadays you can just watch season after season after season. In the old days, when I first started writing, I used to buy DVDs to put them on, because you couldn't rely on it just to come on the ordinary free-to-air television, and I needed to write, so I needed to have something to write to. But yeah, so the world has moved on to allow writers like me to produce a lot more because they've given the background is accessible.
I love it.
So I have one more question. So,
can you hear him?
Yeah, I can.
That's my
there's
husband.
not
He
enough
can't
background
remember.
noise. I forgot what I was going to say. I don't have that word. I need more background. Now, naming a book. Have you actually ever come up with a name that you're allowed to use? Or do because I've talked to other authors, and it's like they always come up with this name, and then nope, that's not going to work, and marketing gets involved, and focus groups get involved, and how often does that happen to you?
Oh, look, in America a lot. in Australia they don't. In Australia they don't change names very often. They usually let the author go with whatever they have. So all my books have Australian titles, which were the titles that I chose for them. And when they're published in America, the titles are changed. But that makes sense because it's a different culture, so different. The language is subtly different. So what a title means in Australia is subtly different to what it means in America. So I'm okay with that. I think a title for me, a title is a bit like a cover. The marketing people know their job, so I let them do whatever they want to do. As long as they leave me control of what's between the covers, I'm happy.
Thank you.
I do have a question online from Amy. She says, I know you said that you're not a plotter, but as you're weaving a story like this, what is the process for writing a story maze? She said, I seriously suspected every character at one point in the story. Do you have to go back a lot, or does it just flow like that for you?
It just flows. It goes forward. And when you were suspecting that character, so was I, because I didn't know. So it apart one of the advantages of writing the way I do is I'm experiencing things at the same time as the reader. So if you're suspecting someone, you can pretty well be sure that I'm suspecting them at the same time. And if it keeps the pace going, because if the story is dragging for you, it's dragging for me too. And if you want to find something out, I want to find something out too. The thing is, you have to turn the page, I have to write it to find out. And so it works like that. And again, as I was saying, it's that mysterious thing that in the human mind that you don't know what on earth is exactly going on. That the human brain can take all these disparate things and put them together and come out with a cohesive story. But no, I don't ever go back and check. Well, I haven't needed to go back and put clues in or take clues out or change people. It just goes forward. And quite often when I'm writing things, when someone gets stabbed or someone rings or someone screams, I don't know why that happened. I've got to keep writing to find out.
Ursula, did you have any more questions there?
Do I have any more questions? Anybody?
I have a quiet group tonight. It's late. We're a quiet group tonight.
Okay, I'm going to hide you from the stage and we'll go back and finish up my questions. If anybody has any questions, just ping me in the chat.
Okay. Thank you for having me.
Okay, just have a couple more questions for you. So do you have the opportunity to read a lot of books, and what upcoming books are you most excited about and would you like to recommend to us?
I do read a lot, but I have less than I used to because the world gets crowded, and quite often also there's lists that I have to read. So in Australia, I do a lot of circuits of festivals and things, and you read the authors, and delightedly so. It's a great way to be introduced to wonderful writers. I have on order House Guest by Hank Philippi Ryan, which I'm really looking forward to. I have and again I've forgotten the title. Samantha Bailey's book, which is called, help me. You might know. Samantha Bailey's new book. It's got this wonderful cover with a girl in a yellow raincoat.
I'm pretty good at Googling things fast here. And it didn't come up for me.
Oh.
Look it up.
Well, it's a beautiful. It's got a girl in the yellow raincoat. I'm really at this. I've got that on my.
The Woman on the Edge. Is that
Woman
it?
on the Edge? Yes, that sounds like it. Woman on the Edge, and Nita Prose's The Maid. Those are the Americans that I'm looking forward to at the moment. There is a book by Benjamin Stevenson called Everyone in My Family Has Killed Someone.
Oh, I like that title.
Yeah, it sounds. And I think it has been released or is just about to be released in America. The Australians, which I don't know if they've been released in Australia yet, there's a wonderful book called The Good Mother by Ray Cairns, and there's The Torrent by Danuka Mackenzie. They're all the ones that I've read recently. There's also Nina Campbell's Daughters of Eve. So a lot of crime. A lot of crime fiction.
We've got a lot of crime fiction writers or readers in our that come into our store, so we're not.
Yeah.
Don't be ashamed of that at all.
So I'm not exclusively crime fiction, but of course, because I work in that
Yep.
in that area, that's what's pertinent always. Those are the books that tend to be at the top of the pile. There's also a book by Lynette Noni, the third in a trilogy, called The Blood Traitor, and that's a fantasy young adult, which I think was released in the US a couple of days ago. Yeah. So I'm really looking forward to that. I've read the other two books, and Lynn's a terrific writer. So there's always many books on the go.
That is awesome.
On my pile, and of course I'm one of these people that seems to buy more than I can physically read. And
Guilty.
I was talking to my husband, piles and piles of books. And I was talking to my husband the other day, and the solution we've come up with is we've got to build more bookshelves.
Yes, that's the only solution. That's why I tell everybody I moved last year, so I had more room for books.
We're seriously thinking of putting on an extension to the house just so that we can put in a library of bookshelves, a room with just nothing but bookshelves, to contain this terrible habit that we have of acquiring books.
One of my favorite questions to ask the people we speak with is, what is one thing you wish people would ask you about, and what would you like to and would you like to share that with us?
That they would ask me about. I think nobody's ever really asked me about acknowledgements in a book, and I find them, being a writer, I find them fascinating. When a writer writes acknowledgements, it often takes them longer than it does to write the novel. but it gives you a real insight into the village that raised that book. Because very few of us write in isolation. We all write with the indulgence and the help of family and friends, of editors and publishers and publishing professionals. All of that goes together to bringing the book to the reader. And I've been in the game for a little while now, and the family or the village that is behind a book is really pertinent to me. But on top of that, it's also the writerly solidarity that's behind a book. So, I'm on social media like everyone else, and I've noticed that every time you post good news about a book, a bestseller list or award, the first people to jump on and cheer for you are other writers. And of all the things this profession has given me, the thing that I value the most is that solidarity, that community of readers and writers who are just so supportive and who always seem to be cheering for you, and who are completely unexhausting in their goodwill, and their hope for you. When I first started as a writer with my debut book, I had the benefit of a writer who'd been a little bit longer in the game, and I was commenting on how wonderful the support was and how other writers were always the first ones to cheer for you. And she said to me, Sulari, writers are not in competition with each other. Readers don't read just one book. So if any writer makes a reader, they're making a reader for all of us. And so, we celebrate everybody because everybody's success is all of our success. And I think that is just the most wonderful thing about being a writer. It's, I was a lawyer before. It was not the way it worked then. So that's, I suppose, the only thing that I feel the need to get off my chest.
I love reading acknowledgments because sometimes you find really funny, things in them. I think it was one of the books. I think one of Jay Kristoff's books, he thanked whiskey because he felt the need to do that. So sometimes you find a really
Oh.
funny acknowledgement. Yeah.
Oh, the alcohol. I was thinking, is whiskey a cat?
No, it was the actual alcohol.
Yeah, exactly. And it's whatever gets you through. It gives you a real insight into how the book was made when you look at the acknowledgements. And it's rightly, and as you can see with the woman in the library, rightly friendships interest me. People who are both in the profession of making things up, because essentially that's what writers do. We are professional makers of things up. And that's a really bad phrasing, but that's what we do. We're professional liars. And the kind of conversations that go on between writers when they're talking about these entirely fictional worlds that they're living in is really quite interesting and fascinating, and bizarre.
Yes. So we're getting close to the end of the hour, and one of my favorite things to end with is I'm a huge fan of Inside the Actor Studio. So I just have some quick fire questions for you. What is your favorite book?
Kill a Mockingbird.
Oh, yes, that's a good one.
Yeah.
What
So
profession?
it has been. Sorry,
Oh, go
I
ahead.
shouldn't explain further. These are short.
No,
but it
feel
has
free
been
to
my
explain.
favorite. It's been my favorite since I was 12. I've still not met a book that speaks to me as thoroughly as that one.
It is a beautiful one. I do enjoy that one. What profession other than yours would you like to attempt? And I know you've been a lawyer, you studied astrophysics, you're an author. So what else would you like to do?
I'd kind of like to direct a movie. I don't know if
An
that's
adaptation of one
related.
of your own books or somebody else?
Yeah, I think, or yeah, I kind of think it's another way of storytelling. So I wouldn't mind knowing what to do. I don't have any experience. I wouldn't know how to frame a shot or anything of the sort. But I kind of like the idea of sitting in the director's chair with those, and saying, cut. But yes, that would be an interesting visual space to work in.
Are you a coffee drinker or a tea drinker, or both?
Both in vast quantities.
I think I know the answer to this one. Dog or cat?
Dog. Look, I do have 2 cats, and I do love cats, but I'm a dog person. Yeah, I look a little bit like my dogs. In fact, I have a Labradoodle, and we're very similar. And we're starting to morph.
So when it comes to books, I think I probably already know the answer to this based on our conversation about bookshelves. Physical, electronic, or audio do you prefer?
Oh, look, I'll do all of them, to be honest. So my husband's very much a physical book, so we'd like to have the physical thing.
Yeah.
But I've read books electronically, and it's really convenient when you're moving. And I love audiobooks. I love audiobooks. It makes, and because of where I live in country New South Wales. So Australia's a big country. It's as big as America. But we're much more spaced out, so we do a lot of traveling. So it's not unusual for me to drive 3.5 hours to an event, and on those occasions, the audiobook is my companion.
Awesome. If heaven exists, what would you like to hear when you cross over?
I really like Hilltop Hoods. and I also like Eminem. But this is what I was saying to you before. I'm actually tone deaf musically, so I really like rap because it's words and it's story. Hilltop Hoods is Hilltop Hoods are also an Australian rap group.
Oh, cool.
And they're great. They're terrific. They're probably a little bit less angry than American rap, but I also really like Eminem. I love finding stories in words. So yeah,
there's a poetry in hip hop that exists.
So I don't know how rap would go in heaven, and I don't know if rap artists would want to be played in heaven. But
I I
If
think
it was
like
up
a
to
good
me.
writer, introducing people to books, if you find another listener and wherever they may be, that's perfectly acceptable. Awesome. I just want to ask the audience if anybody has any last minute questions or if there's anything else you would like to share with us, Sulari.
I can see one up here from Amy Stevens. Should I answer that one? You're weaving, or is that the one you asked me
That's
before?
one I asked already. Yep, I got that one.
Sorry. Yeah,
Yep,
it's getting slow.
you're fine.
Sorry. No, there's nothing else. I am very aware of the privilege of being in a position to spend my days writing. Um, it is, it's not something that everyone has the privilege of doing, because the world is tough and people have to earn livings and people have to look after family and so on, and to actually find a space and find the mind space and the time and the indulgence to do this is something you have to work for and fight for. And if you get it, quite often it's just a privilege that you should be aware of. So I am very aware of it. For me, writing is not work. It's still what I want to do more than anything else in the world, and it's just making the real world work with that. To remember to do housework occasionally, so this doesn't become a fire hazard. Or to pick up the kids or whatever. It all
Right,
just works in. Yeah. So it's never for me that's never been the challenge, to actually sit down with words. That's always been the privilege.
Well, thank you for your time, and we wish you the best of luck with this book and all future novels. And if you ever make it to the middle of the United States, we'd love to host you here. So,
Thank
you
you. I'd
again
love
for
to
your
come. Thank you.
Enjoy your time in Boston this fall.
Oh, yeah, I'm looking so forward to it.
Well, thank you again. And thank you everyone for coming tonight. You can pick up a copy of The Woman in the Library at Swamp Fox Bookstore or via bookshop.org, or any independent bookstore near you will be happy to order it if they don't have it on their shelves. Thank you for joining us tonight, and we'll see you all soon.
Thank you for having me.